Let's continue our discussion with what we have stopped. We'll try to take up some couple of problems what we'll be looking at in solving related to the shear strength of the soils. It's a straightforward problem what is given here. It states that in an in situ vein shear test on a saturated clay, a torque of 35 Newton meter was required to shear the soil. The diameter of the vein was 50 mm and length is 100 mm. Calculate undrained shear strength of the clay. The vein was then rotated rapidly to cause remolding of the soil. The torque required to shear the soil in the remolded state was 5 Newton meter. Determine the sensitivity of the clay. So what we are ultimately required in this problem is to determine the sensitivity of the clay. So how do we determine the sensitivity of the clay? We say sensitivity ST is nothing but it is undrained cohesion in undisturbed state to that of undrained cohesion value in remolded state. This is one way how I can define. I can also even define this in terms of your unconfined compression strength also, because if Cu, sometimes sensitivity value is not just only represented in Cu terms, it can also be represented in terms of what is called as unconfined compression strength. Where did we come across this word? In the case of your UC test. Okay, so unconfined compressive strength of the soil in undisturbed state to that of your unconfined compressive strength of the soil in remolded or disturbed state. Okay, so if I just want to go on to represent, we know that how did we write down this second expression? Second expression we are writing from the first expression only, because Qu, what we know from unconfined compressive strength. Okay, so it's nothing but 2 times that of your Cu, if you can recall. At Cu, we have represented it as half of your Qu value. So from that only, I am trying to write down this particular expression. Okay, so now let's look at what is that we are asked in this particular problem. So we are asked to determine the sensitivity of the soil. So for determining the sensitivity of the soil, we need to find out what is your undrained cohesion value in undisturbed state as well as in your remolded state. Now, how do we calculate your undrained cohesion value? Okay, so we have some relation which we have. Okay, so which is T, that is torque required to cause the shearing in the soil sample, divided by pi into B square H by 2 plus d cube, okay, beta into d cube by 4. This was, I hope, the generalized expression. Now, depending on how your shear stress or shear strength or shear stresses are getting mobilized from the center of your vein blade, from the junction of your vein blade to that of the edge of the vein blade, how the shear stresses are getting mobilized at its edge portion, that is at the bottom and at the top. So depending on this, the beta value we are going to be considering. Okay, so let's say the beta, what I just want to consider is for beta is considered as half. In case if you consider what is called as your linear variation, beta is considered as 2 by 3 in case if it is considered as a rectangular variation, 5 by 3 in the case of your parabolic variation. In case if nothing is specifically mentioned in the problem, you assume that your shear stress distribution is constant, whatever shear stresses that are getting developed from the center of the vein blade to the edge of the vein blade. So that shear stress distribution, you assume it to be constant if nothing specifically mentioned. Okay, so if I assume that to be constant, then what happens? My beta, I will be substituting it as 2 by 3. Then automatically per beta is equal to 2 by 3. My expression for Cu comes out to be T by pi into d square H by 2 plus 2 by 3 into d cube by 4. So that comes out to be d cube by 6. This is going to be my expression for Cu, that is your undrained cohesion value. So once I know what is my expression for Cu, then I, in the case of undisturbed state, if I want to calculate my Cu. Okay. Yeah. So what becomes my Cu value in the case of undisturbed state? So we are given with the torque value. What would cause the shearing in the soil sample at undisturbed condition is torque required to cause the shearing in the soil sample is 35 Newton meter, and we are given with the diameter of the vane blades is simply 50 mm, and height of the vane shear blades is 100 mm. This is the data what we have got. In the case of your regarding the vane shear blades, the data is in both the cases it is same. Only the torque value in undisturbed state is 35 Newton meter to cause the shearing in the soil sample. In remolded state, it is 5 Newton meter. Okay. So this torque, whatever I am trying to refer to, is in undisturbed state. Right. So let me go on to substitute your values into the expression. My expression for Cu is T by pi into d square h by 2 plus dq by 6. So I'll go on to substitute into this expression. T is 35 Newton meter divided by pi into d square h. Okay. So d square h, what is d? D is the diameter, which is 50 mm, which I can substitute it as 0.05 in terms of meters. I am substituting because torque I have substituted in meters, Newton meter. So d square is 0.05 square into h is 0.1 by 2 plus 0.05 whole cube by 3. Right. So upon substituting, what do I get my Cu value? Yeah, 76.394 kilonewton per meter square is approximately correct. And in the case of your remolded state, what is your Cu value? 10.913 kilonewton per meter square is the Cu value in remolded state. So what is ultimately we required to calculate? Sensitivity of the soil. Okay. So Cu in undisturbed condition to that of your Cu in remolded condition. Yeah. So that is 76.394 divided by 10.913. So it comes out to be 7. Okay. So what does it mean? The sensitivity of this particular saturated clay is equal to 7. It means that when the soil is in undisturbed state, the strength of the soil is 7 times higher than that of the strength of the soil when it is in remolded or disturbed condition. Okay. So that much decrease is happening in terms of the strength of the soil when it is attaining what is called as a remolded state or an undisturbed state. Okay. So moving on with another problem. The representative liquid limit and plastic limit values of a saturated, normally consolidated clay deposit are 60% and 30% respectively. The saturated unit weight of the soil is 19 kilonewton per meter cube. Estimate the undrained shear strength of the soil at a depth of 10 meters from ground surface. And it is said that the water table is at 8 meters below ground level. So what we are required to find out is determining the undrained shear strength of the soil. If you can understand the undrained shear strength of the soil, if you can go on to recall. So whenever the soil is said to be undrained, automatically your undrained shear strength of the soil is nothing but it is equal to your undrained cohesion value of the soil. So we are required to calculate your undrained cohesion value. So how do I calculate the undrained cohesion value? Based on the liquid limit and plastic limit values that are given for the soil. Okay. So if you can recall that we have what we have discussed in our last class regarding to that of the Stempton's expression, what he has given, an empirical relation, what he has given for determining the Cu value, which is in terms of the effective stress, which is given as Cu by sigma dash is equal to 0.11 plus 0.0037 into plasticity index, where this plasticity index, what we are trying to talk about, has to be substituted in percentage. Okay. So let's go back to see that expression, what we have talked in our last class. Yeah. So towards the bottom, Cu by sigma dash is equal to 0.11 plus 0.0037 into plasticity index in terms of the percentage is what I am supposed to be substituting. And all the data is very much given here. So that is liquid limit value in the problem is given as 60%. Plastic limit value is given as 30%. And so based on this liquid limit and plastic limit, I can go on to calculate my plasticity index, which is liquid limit minus plastic limit, so which I can write it as 60 minus 30%. So plasticity index comes out to be 30%. And what else is additionally required to me in this particular problem? I want to calculate what is sigma dash. Now, how do we calculate sigma dash? That is the effective stress. Effective stress where I want to calculate. Okay, I am required to calculate the effective stress at that particular depth where this particular soil sample is collected. Okay, or where that particular soil sample that we are trying to look at, which has got the liquid limit 60% and plastic limit 30%. Okay, so what is given regarding the ground condition where this particular soil representative soil sample what we are talking about is collected. Okay, so at a depth of 10 meters from ground surface is what is mentioned. So if I say this is my ground surface, that so-called soil sample what you are trying to look at is at a depth of 10 meters from the ground surface. Okay, this is the 10 meters. And what is also given is water table is at 8 meters below the ground surface. Okay, water table is at 8 meters below the ground surface. So below the ground surface at a depth of 8 meters, you have got your position of water table. Now, what does it mean? Your soil, what I am trying to look at is at a depth of 2 meters from the water table. Now, let's go on to calculate your effective stress. Effective stress at what depth? 10 meters. So, effective stress at 10 meters is nothing but total stress at that depth of 10 meters. So, what is the unit weight of the soil? It is 19 kilonewton per meter cube. Okay. So, unit weight of the soil, that's saturated, though water table is existing or not, soil is simply considered to be a saturated soil sample. So unit weight is given as 19 kilonewton per meter cube. So my total stress minus pore water pressure, if I calculate, I'll be getting your effective stress. So what becomes my total stress? Total stress is nothing but unit weight of soil 19 into depth is 10 meters minus pore water pressure. Unit weight of water is 9.81 into the depth of the pressure head corresponding to the soil position. So how much is my pressure head corresponding to the soil position means from the water table, the soil is at a depth of 2 meters. So pressure head is 2. If I go on to calculate my effective stress, so hopefully my effective stress at the depth of the 10th meter comes out to be equal to 170.38 kilonewton per meter square. Okay. So once the effective stress value is known, then I can go on to simply substitute everything into that particular expression. What is given? Effective stress is known, plasticity index is known. So I can simply write down your Cu, which is in fact nothing but your undrained shear strength of the soil, which is equal to sigma dash into 0.11 plus 0.0037 into plasticity index in terms of percentage I have to substitute. Okay, so sigma dash I have got it as 170.38 into 0.11 plus 0.0037 into 30%. So I have to directly substitute your plasticity index in terms of percentage there. 37.5 kilonewton per meter square is going to be your undrained shear strength of the soil. Okay. So moving on with the next problem. An unconfined compression test was conducted on an undisturbed sample of clay. So we are trying to talk about a UC test which is conducted on an undisturbed soil sample. The sample has had a diameter of 37.5 mm and was 80 mm long. Okay, So your soil sample height, what is given is 80 mm and the diameter is 37.5 mm. The load at failure measured by the proving ring was 28 newtons. So when the soil sample is undergoing the failure, the load which is measured by the proving ring, what do we call that particular load as? Your deviatoric load, a deviator load. Okay. So I'm not talking in terms of stress. I'm talking in terms of your load. So the deviatoric load which was causing the shearing in your soil sample is 28 newtons. And the axial deformation of the soil sample, the axial deformation of the sample at failure was 13 mm. So it means when the soil sample was observed to be failing, the amount of vertical deformation that took place in the soil at failure was 13 mm. So determine the unconfined compressive strength and the undrained shear strength of the clay. So what we are required to calculate is here QU, and undrained shear strength is in turn at the failure is nothing but I'll be writing it as your CU. Okay. So QU is what I require. So once I know the QU, CU is nothing but half of your QU. Okay. So let's go ahead in understanding and accordingly solving our problem. If I need to go on to solve my problem, first I need to be knowing what is the deviatoric stress at the failure of the soil sample. So that deviatoric stress at the failure of the soil sample itself is what we call it as your unconfined compressive strength of the soil. Okay. So why do we say the deviatoric stress at failure itself is what we call it as your unconfined compressive strength? So if I go back to my UC test, so on the horizontal axis I am indicating what is called as your sigma. On the vertical axis I am indicating tau. So in the case of UC test, sigma 3 value is 0. So it means that the Mohr circle will start passing through the origin. And this is sigma 3, which is 0. And this is sigma 1. So obviously sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2 is, sigma 1 minus sigma 3 is what we call it as your deviatoric stress. Okay. So this difference in principal stresses is what we call it as your deviatoric stress. So what is this deviatoric stress is equal to? It is nothing but it is equal to your unconfined compressive strength. So if I am required to calculate your unconfined compressive strength, it means that I need to know what is your deviatoric stress. If I need to know what is the deviatoric stress, then let's go on to calculate what is your deviatoric stress. I know how much was the load causing the failure in the soil sample. That is the deviatoric load that was required to cause the failure in the soil sample was known. What I need to know is stress. Stress is nothing but force by area. Okay. But if you can recall, when we have discussed about your UC test, we said we are going to be taking into consideration of the change in cross-sectional area as you continuously cause the shearing in the soil sample, where we said the correct cross-sectional area is nothing but it is equal to your initial cross-sectional area divided by 1 minus epsilon, if I am correct. Where A naught refers to that of your initial cross-sectional area, AC refers to that of your, let me write it. This is the correct cross-sectional area and this is the initial cross-sectional area of the soil sample. Now, where epsilon refers to that of the strain. Okay. Now, strain, what I am looking at is at the failure of the soil sample, and the correct cross-sectional area, what I am interested in finding out is your cross-sectional area at the failure of the soil sample. So, at failure, everything what I am trying to talk about is at failure. Even the deviatoric stress calculation or anything that I wanted to calculate is at the failure of the soil sample. So, at the failure of the soil sample, my correct cross-sectional area is equal to. Now, what is the initial cross-sectional area of the soil sample? Okay. So what is my initial cross-sectional area? Initial cross-sectional area is nothing but pi by 4 into d square. What does d square refers to? It is your 37.5 whole square, because the diameter of the soil sample, initial diameter of the soil sample is given as 37.5 mm. So initial cross-sectional area of the soil sample is what I have represented, divided by 1 minus epsilon. How do we write down epsilon? Epsilon is nothing but strain. Okay. Strain at the failure I am trying to talk about. So strain generally is defined as deformation by its original dimension. So how much amount of deformation I am coming across at the failure of the soil sample? That is 13 mm divided by what was the original height of the soil sample? It is 80 mm. So from this I can get What is my correct cross-sectional area of the soil sample? 1318.76 mm square. So once the correct area is known, then your so-called deviatoric stress at the failure of the soil sample is nothing but your deviatoric load by corrected area. Okay. So my deviatoric load, which was causing the failure in the soil sample, was given as 28 newtons divided by 1318.76. This is in mm square. Okay, right. 1.2 kilonewton per meter square is going to be the deviatoric stress at the failure, and this deviatoric stress at the failure itself is what we are considering it as your unconfined compressive strength of the soil sample, that is QU. Okay, so once QU is known, then we know that CU is nothing but QU by 2, so which is equal to 21.2 by 2, which is 10.6 kilonewton per meter square, is going to be your undrained cohesion. And once we know undrained cohesion, then it means that your undrained shear strength of the soil at the failure of the soil sample is nothing but simply 10.6 kilonewton per meter square. This is what we were interested in calculating. Okay. Yeah. Next, let's move on to understand another problem. Please read the problem carefully. In a triaxial test, a soil sample was consolidated under a cell pressure of 700 kilopascal and a back pressure of 350 kilopascal. Thereafter, with the drainage not allowed, the cell pressure was raised to 800 kilopascal, resulting in the increased pore water pressure reading of 445 kilopascal. The axial load was then increased to give a deviator stress of 575 kilopascal, while the cell pressure remained at same 800 kilopascal, and a pore pressure reading of 640 kilopascal is what is that you have in the soil sample when the deviatoric stress of 575 kilopascal was additionally applied on the soil sample. Calculate the pore pressure coefficients B and A. That's nothing but your Kempton's pore water pressure coefficients B and A parameters is what we are required to calculate. So what is the data that is given to us in the problem, and what are those certain terms which are something new or which we may not be understanding? Okay. So what is said is, initially the amount of cell pressure what was getting applied on the soil sample was 700 kilopascal. So the amount of confining pressure what you were applying on the soil sample was 700 kilopascal, and the subsequent back pressure what you have maintained in the soil is 300 kilopascal. So what is this back pressure mean? When you look at a triaxial cell, let's say for example, if this is my triaxial cell, and inside this triaxial cell, if we are placing your soil sample on a kind of a pedestal, to the bottom of this pedestal, you have got some wall connected with one wall and another wall, and to this triaxial cell, there is another wall connected. Okay, so this wall will be using for supplying the cell pressure. One wall here is what we'll be using for supplying what is called as back pressure. I'll tell what is the use of that. And another wall is what we are going to be making use for allowing the drainage out of your soil sample. Okay, now let's understand. Cell pressure is something what we have already talked about. Drainage valve is something what we have already talked about. Now, what is this valve through which the back pressure is supplied? Now, if I want to ensure that your soil sample has to be fully saturated, because in any of the triaxial tests, either in UU test or CU test or CD test, we said the soil sample has to be fully saturated. If the soil sample has to be fully saturated, before placing the soil sample inside the triaxial cell, I cannot ensure to have 100% saturation in my soil sample. If 100% saturation, if I am trying to achieve, then extracting that fully saturated soil sample would become difficult to place it inside your triaxial cell, because there is all possibilities that no, your soil sample easily gets damaged when you are trying to extract it and place it inside your triaxial cell. Okay, so that's the reason why what we do is you take your triaxial cell in its natural state, triaxial soil sample, you place it in your triaxial cell in its natural state, and with the help of the valve, whatever is available, we try to inject water into the soil sample with some pressure. I repeat, we allow water to get passed into the void spaces that are existing in the soil sample. With some pressure, we supply the water into the soil sample. Okay, and the pressure with which we are going to supply the water into the soil sample for attaining full saturation should be less than that of your cell pressure. I repeat, the back pressure, whatever you maintain, I'm talking in general procedure. Okay, the back pressure what you maintain for saturating your soil sample should be certainly less than that of your cell pressure. Why is it? If the supplied back pressure is more than that of the cell pressure, there is all possibilities that your soil sample will get damaged, because the pressure with which you are trying to pump the water inside the pore spaces, if it is more, then the soil sample will get disturbed. The soil skeleton structure get disturbed. So because of which you cannot say that soil is in undisturbed condition, rather the soil is going to be in disturbed condition there. Okay. Now, whenever you are going to supply or allow the water to pass into the interconnected void path by with some pressure, you are injecting the water into the soil sample. That pressure, so-called back pressure, whatever with which you are allowing the water to pass into the soil sample, that pressure itself is what we can call it as your pore water pressure. Okay, so how much is your pore water pressure existing in your soil sample? Means it's nothing but the back pressure with which, with whatever pressure you have injected the water into the interconnected void paths, that itself is your pressure developed inside your pore spaces because of the water molecules or because of the water particles. Okay, so that back pressure in simple terms is nothing but it's the amount of pore water pressure what was getting developed in your soil sample. That's what I mean to say. Okay, so now let me understand the problem again. In a triaxial test, a soil sample was consolidated under a cell pressure of 700 kilopascals and a back pressure of 350 kilopascals. So it means a cell pressure when it is 700 kilopascal, the subsequent pore water pressure what was existing there is 350 kilopascal. Then thereafter, you are not allowing any drainage, but cell pressure was raised to 800 kilopascal. Cell pressure was raised to 800 kilopascals means what is the increment in cell pressure? Increment in cell pressure is 800 minus 700, that is only 100 kilopascal. The increment in cell pressure is 100 kilopascal. Because of that increment of 100 kilopascals of cell pressure on the soil sample, which resulted in an increase in pore water pressure reading of 445 kilopascal. So you have to carefully understand the statements what are mentioned there. So when you are trying to increase the cell pressure by what is called as 100 kilopascals, then the subsequent pore water pressure what you are trying to represent is increasing by 445 kilopascals. Okay, so sorry, increase to a reading of 445 kilopascal. Then subsequent change in the pore water pressure in the soil sample for a corresponding change in your confining pressure. Change in confining pressure is 100 kilopascal. So for that 100 kilopascal change in confining pressure, the corresponding change in pore water pressure is nothing but 445 minus 350 kilopascal, which is 95 kilopascal. Okay. So let us go on to understand how to calculate your pore pressure coefficients B and A. So let me go on to say quickly write down the expression what we had for your increase in pore water pressure, which we called it as your Skempton's pore pressure equation. Okay, so which is nothing but B into delta sigma, delta U in terms of the confining pressure plus A into, sorry, is it delta UC or sorry, this is delta sigma C. That's a change in confining pressure plus A into delta sigma 1 minus delta sigma 3. That's nothing but increment in deviatoric stress. I hope this is the expression what we have, which we have called it as Skempton's pore pressure equation. So if we try to expand this, we had this expression represented as B into delta sigma C plus B into A into delta sigma 1 minus delta sigma 3. Or delta sigma C is nothing but sigma 3. That's your confining pressure. Okay, so this B into A is what we have represented as something A dash. Okay, so where that A dash is nothing but the product of your pore pressure coefficients, Skempton's pore pressure coefficients B and A. So my objective is to calculate Skempton's pore water pressure parameters B and A. So if I want to calculate this Skempton's pore water pressure parameters B and A, so I am just trying to further rewrite it according to my understanding what we had. This is nothing but B into delta sigma 3 is what we have called it as increment or change in pore water pressure because of the applied confining pressure, plus the second term is what we have written it as increase in pore water pressure because of the applied deviatoric stress. This increment in pore water pressure because of the applied confining pressure plus increment in pore water pressure because of the applied deviatoric stress, total put together is what we call it as total increase in the pore water pressure in that particular soil sample. I hope I made some sense to what I am trying to discuss. Now, if I want to calculate your Skempton's pore water pressure parameters B and A, B parameter is what we are trying to write it as delta UC, and A parameter in turn, first I'll try to write down what is A dash from this expression, and then I'll go on to calculate what is your A from that A dash value. Okay, so let me quickly go on to solve it. So Skempton's pore water pressure parameter B is in turn nothing but, look at here, B into delta sigma 3. Okay, I'll just I'll make use of the space here. We know that B into delta sigma 3 is equal to increase in pore water pressure because of the applied confining stress. So this implies B is nothing but how much is that increase in pore water pressure because of the applied confining stress divided by what was that increase in confining pressure that you have applied on the soil sample, which I can write it as delta sigma 3 or delta sigma C. Both are one and same. Okay. So from here I can say B is nothing but delta UC by delta sigma C. So what is delta UC means? It's the increase in pore water pressure. So my pore water pressure got increased to 445 minus the initial pore water pressure what I had in my soil sample was 350 divided by pore water confining pressure was increased to 800 minus the initial confining pressure what was existing was 700. So increment in pore water pressure for the corresponding increment in confining pressure. So that's nothing but 95 by 100, so which is equal to 0.95. Okay, so your pore water pressure parameter, Skempton's pore water pressure parameter B is nothing but coming out to be 0.95. Now likewise, if I want to go on to calculate your Skempton's pore water pressure parameter A, so I can just say Skempton's pore water pressure parameter A is nothing but A dash by B. If you can recall from the earlier representation, we said A dash is nothing but A into B. Now, what is this A dash equal to? A dash is nothing but it is equal to, if I go back to my earlier expression, so A dash into increment in deviatoric stress is nothing but change in your pore water pressure because of that applied deviatoric stress. So I can simply write your A dash as increase in pore water pressure because of that applied deviatoric stress divided by how much is that corresponding increment in terms of the deviatoric stress that you have applied on the soil sample. Okay, so for calculating A, I require what is A dash. For calculating A dash, I'll be making use of this particular expression. So therefore, A dash is equal to delta UD divided by that so-called increment in deviatoric stress. That is delta sigma 1 minus delta sigma 3. Okay. So what is delta UD? So let's go back to your problem and let us understand. The axial load was then increased to give a deviatoric stress of 575 kilopascal. So the amount of deviatoric stress what was induced on your soil sample was 575 kilopascal. You are maintaining the same cell pressure. Cell pressure on the soil sample was same 800 kilopascal. But when you went on to apply what is called as your axial stress on the soil sample, which is nothing but we call it as your deviatoric stress, and that amount of deviator stress or deviatoric stress that is applied is 575 kilopascal. So for that amount of applied deviatoric stress of 575 kilopascal, the pore pressure reading what you had is 640 kilopascal. If I am measuring the pore water pressure in that soil sample, I repeat, when I am measuring the pore water pressure in that soil sample, I got the pore water pressure value equal to 640 kilopascal. When confining pressure of 800 kilopascals was applied, the pore water pressure existing in the soil sample was 445 kilopascal. When additionally you have applied your deviatoric stress on the soil sample, pore water pressure went on to become 640 kilopascals in your soil sample. Then how much is that increase in pore water pressure because of only that applied deviatoric stress? Only because of the applied deviatoric stress, the increment in pore water pressure is nothing but 640 minus 445 kilopascal. That is going to be your increment in pore water pressure only because of your applied deviatoric stress. So it's nothing but 640 minus 445. You can see this representation. Okay, increase in pore water pressure only because of your applied deviatoric stress. This is divided by how much is your increment in stress in that vertical direction, which we are calling it as your deviatoric stress. So which is given as 575 kilopascal. So this is equal to 0.34. So once the A dash value is 0.34, then I can simply say A is equal to A dash by B, which is nothing but equal to 0.34 divided by B value is 0.95. 0.35. Okay. So my Skempton's pore water pressure parameters B and A, I am getting it as 0.95 and I am getting it as 0.35. So that's how we go on to calculate your Skempton's pore water pressure parameters. Okay. So next problem. The effective stress shear strength parameters of a completely saturated clay are C dash is equal to 20 kilopascals and phi dash is equal to 25 degrees. Okay. So C dash in the problem is given as 20 kilopascal and your phi dash value is nothing but it is 25 degrees. A sample of this clay was tested in a UU test under a cell pressure of 200 kilopascal. The cell pressure what was applied on the soil sample was 200 kilopascal. And the principal stress difference at failure was 110 kilopascal. What does this principal stress difference means? Sigma 1 minus sigma 3 at the failure of the soil sample is nothing but it is equal to 110 kilopascal. This is one way I can write it, sigma 1 minus sigma 3 at failure, or otherwise I can also write it as sigma 1 at failure minus sigma 3 at failure of the soil sample is nothing but it is equal to 110 kilopascal. Okay, this is the data what is given to us, and we are asked to calculate what was the value of pore water pressure at failure. So we are required to calculate pore water pressure at the failure of the soil sample. So how much is the pore water pressure existing in the soil sample at its failure? So how do we calculate? If I am trying to talk about your pore water pressure, so in general from our understanding, how do we write down pore water pressure? Pore water pressure is, U is nothing but it is equal to total stress minus effective stress. Now I want to know how much is my total stress and I want to know how much is my effective stress. So if I know my total stress and effective stress, difference in total stress and effective stress, gives me what is your pore water pressure. Okay, so let's go on to understand how to calculate your total stress and subsequent effective stress. So if we know your total stress and effective stress, then we can simply say how much is your pore water pressure existing there. So let's go on to understand some fundamental expressions what we have talked about earlier. But however, before I start talking about some fundamental expressions what we have derived from Mohr circle concept, okay. So I'll just try to even further understand some more things from this earlier expression what I have represented here. So we know that sigma 1 at failure minus sigma 3 at failure of the soil sample is equal to 110. And this is 110 kilopascal, which I am saying it can also be written as sigma 1 dash at the failure of the soil sample minus sigma 3 dash at the failure of the soil sample. How I am writing it? Sigma 1 dash at failure. How do I write down? Sigma 1 dash at failure means it is sigma 1 at failure minus the pore water pressure at the failure of the soil sample. Okay. Minus sigma 3 dash at failure is what I can write it as sigma 3 at failure minus the pore water pressure at the failure of the soil sample. So if I go on to write down sigma 1 dash at failure, okay, the sigma 1 dash at failure is what I am writing it as sigma 1 at failure minus the pore water pressure at failure. And the sigma 3 dash at failure is what I am writing it as sigma 3 at failure minus the pore water pressure at the failure. So if I substitute these two terms into that expression, what do I get? Sigma 1 dash at failure is nothing but sigma 1 at failure minus UF minus sigma 3 dash at failure is sigma 3F minus UF. So minus of minus UF becomes plus UF and another term is minus UF. So these two terms gets cancelled upon substitution. What I'll have simply is sigma 1 dash at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure is nothing but equal to sigma 1 at failure minus sigma 3 at failure, which I have already represented here. So that's the reason why I'm saying the difference of your deviatoric stress in terms of total stress condition or in terms of your effective stress condition, if I'm trying to talk about your deviatoric stress, it's simply nothing but it is equal to 110 kilopascals. That's what we understand in the case of your UU test also. If you go back to your UU test and see, we said the diameter of the Mohr circles for respective total stress condition or effective stress condition on that soil sample is same. We have talked about that. So from that condition only we are getting it. Yeah. So once we have this condition and once we go on to understand some other expression what we have learned earlier, that is nothing but sigma 1 dash at failure. If I want to know how much is my major principal stress in terms of the effective state of stress, I can try to calculate if sigma 3 dash at failure is known acting on the soil sample, where we said this is nothing but 1 plus sine phi dash divided by 1 minus sine phi dash plus 2c dash into under root of 1 plus sine phi dash by 1 minus sine phi dash. This is in terms of your effective state of stress condition. In terms of total state of stress condition, if I want to write down same expression, this is in terms of effective stresses. In terms of total stresses, if I just want to write down the similar kind of expression is going to be same. What is going to be my expression? Sigma 1 at failure is nothing but sigma 3 at failure into 1 plus sine phi by 1 minus sine phi plus 2c into under root of 1 plus sine phi by 1 minus sine phi. This expression is going to be in terms of your total stress condition. Okay. So now let's quickly come back to our problem, what we have been looking at. So we have what is that difference between sigma 1 at failure and sigma 3 at failure in terms of total stress or in terms of the effective stress. So if that is the condition, so let me go on to simplify my problem by rewriting this particular expression in terms of the effective stress. Okay, because I'll be trying to talk in terms of the effective stress. Why? Because if effective stress something, if I can calculate already in terms of total stress, the deviated stress relation I know. Okay, so pore water pressure is nothing but total stress minus the corresponding effective stress. Okay, if you look at here, I know what is my sigma 3 value in terms of the total stress related to the failure of the soil sample. Okay, and if at all I can calculate your effective stress sigma 3 dash at the failure of the soil sample. So pore water pressure in the soil sample is nothing but sigma 3 at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure. So this simply sigma 3 is what I can write it as sigma 3 at the failure of the soil sample. So when the soil sample is failing, your amount of confining pressure what was existing on the soil sample is only 200 kilopascal. Okay. Right. So if I just want to rewrite my expression according to my convenience, that is sigma 1 dash at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure. If I just want to write it, sigma 1 dash at failure is this expression. Sigma 3 dash at failure is simply minus sigma 3 dash at failure if I am trying to subtract from sigma 1 dash. So what I am going to be getting here is, I am just directly writing that particular expression. Sigma 1 dash at failure plus sigma 3 dash at failure into sine phi dash plus 2c dash into cos phi dash. This expression I am not trying to derive it anything new. So when you started from your Mohr circle construction and then when you went on to write down those relations, there itself you had this particular relation. I am not writing anything new here. Upon simplifying this expression only, you got your expression for sigma 1 dash at failure in terms of sigma 3 dash at failure. Or I said you can write down your sigma 3 dash at failure in terms of your sigma 1 dash at failure. Upon simplifying this particular expression only. Okay. So the same thing I am trying to use. Sigma 1 dash at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure. The difference of these two values is nothing but 110, which we have already seen in our earlier discussion, which is equal to, what is sigma 1 dash at failure? I don't know specifically what is my sigma 1 dash at failure, and what is sigma 3 dash at failure. Particularly, I do not know what is my sigma 3 dash at failure, but however, I'll be substituting those terms as it is into sine. What is my phi dash value equal to? Phi dash is 25 degrees, C dash is 20. Sine 20 degrees, sorry, 25 degrees plus 2 into C dash is 20 to cos 25 degrees. Sigma 1 dash at failure plus sigma 3 dash at failure value equal to 255.9. Okay. And we know that sigma 1 dash at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure is equal to 110. If I just add these two equations, adding this equation 1 and equation 2. Okay, adding equation 1 and equation 2, what do I get? These two gets cancelled, and from which I am going to be getting 2 times that of your sigma 1 dash at failure is equal to 365.9, from which sigma 1 dash at failure comes out to be 82.95 kilopascal. And what becomes my sigma 3 dash at failure then? 72.95 kilopascal. Please do check it whether we have got any mistakes in what we have calculated. Is it 255.9? Please do cross 174. Right. Okay. Then upon simplifying, 42.36 kilopascals is sigma 1 dash at failure, and automatically sigma 3 dash at failure is going to be 32.36 kilopascals. Okay. And therefore, pore water pressure at failure is nothing but, I'll write it as sigma 3 at failure minus sigma 3 dash at failure. Sigma 3 at failure. Go back to our earlier value. Yeah, sigma 3 at failure is 200 kilopascal. 200 minus sigma 3 dash at failure is 32.36 kilopascal. So if I go on to substitute it, I'll be getting 167.64 kilopascals is the pore water pressure what is existing in the soil sample at the failure of the soil. Okay, so this is how we go on to solve this particular problem. Yeah, there is another problem which I wanted you to solve it. Please do take up this particular problem. With this, I conclude that your fourth unit, that is shear strength of the soil, is complete.